Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update. First part thereof for the 30th of March 2026. Apologies, I'm a little bit late. I'm not at the top of my game. Dreaded lurgy given to me by my nearest and dearest. Thank you for that, Helen. So here I am under the weather, but still going to be pumping out some content today, no doubt. We're starting with the hits and losses video where I'm going to be talking about continued strikes from the Ukrainians, although it seems like a bit of a quieter night. We do have strikes in Alchevsk and elsewhere. Still issues with Primorsk and Ust-Luga and these burning depots and refineries that are causing the Russians quite a headache, and other sorts of claims that we're going to throw in as well with regard to what's going on the front line, etc., etc. Okay, before we get there, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Keep yourselves in the loop. Thank you to those who have already done so. Ossifers and gentlemen and gentle ladies, one and all. Right, let's move on to the details. Here we go, and in perfect timing here, Ivan hits me with a cup of tea in my Ukrainian mug, so what a legend. Oh, quite sweet today. Okay, so here we are going to start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them listed in the, well, linked in the description below. We have a couple of numbers that are pretty significant. The first one I'm going to hit you with is actually the operational tactical drones, 2,471. Really high number there. That's shot back up, probably as a result of not last night, but the night before, where there were some 400 plus drones sent into Ukrainian airspace. That is almost certainly adding to the number. Quite a few sent last night as well. And I guess a lot of drone activity across the front lines with the Russians picking up their drone usage after possibly Starlink and Telegram hampered their drone usage previously. Okay. 870 personnel lost. So that's come right back down. That's a 500. That's a third fewer personnel lost than the day before. Incredible drop there to 874 tanks, 4 armored combat vehicles, so fairly low in those categories. 48 artillery systems, pretty useful there. 1 multiple launch rocket system, and 183 vehicles and fuel tanks. Not quite sure what to make of those stats overall, but certainly appears to be a little bit quieter. Possibly the Russians stalling in their attacks. That would be my most hopey-copey interpretation of that. And in fact, let's bring that claim into play next. Russia launched its spring offensive to crack Ukraine's fortress belt, says Euromaidan Press. Less than 2 weeks in, the only army that could reach Sloviansk is stuck, and its commanders face an impossible choice: push alone or reinforce flanks and admit the offensive has stalled. So there is this idea that the Russian offensive has not really gone to plan and that they are somewhat stalling on the front line in certain areas at least. Now, March could be a record month for Russian casualties, said the MOD chief, although obviously last night has dropped back down. Reaching a figure of 50,000 occupiers killed per month will have catastrophic consequences for the enemy, Fedorov added. I mean, yes, absolutely 50,000 will. At the moment, they're not going to be near that. Or, well, yeah, I mean, the last week has been really good, but I don't think they've got a chance of reaching 50,000. However, it's going to be interesting to see what they do reach over the month of. In fact, if we can probably look at the 30-day rolling average, and that will give us a sense of what's happened. So let's go to my favorites and get Dell's stats. Thank you to Dell, who does this every single day. He's an absolute legend as far as I'm concerned. Taking a little bit of time to upload. Sorry, to render. And we have it here. So the data sheet gives us an indication that there are a couple of records for the Russians, for the Russian losses. We have a record in drone losses, 30-day average, and vehicle and fuel tank losses are at a 30-day average of 194.37. So really high numbers there. But if we go to the 30-day rolling average for personnel, we have what, 1,027 No, we have got 1,638. What's going on there? Hang on. No, sorry, that is the record daily average. So we're at 1,000 at the moment. So 1,026 as a 30-day rolling average broadly means multiply that by 30, and you're going to get where this last month has been, which has been around, therefore, 30,000, maybe 31,000, something like that. That is not 50,000. So I don't know how he's going to get the figures of 50,000 from there. But anyway, general staff seem to indicate that around 30,000 have been taken this month, which is a pretty good month. Let's face it, there have been some really bad periods for the Russians during this month, that's for sure. The Institute for the Study of War says that the Kremlin may resort to forced conscription of reservists to maintain the pace of replenishment of losses in Ukraine. We're going to have to keep an eye on what the Kremlin does here, because there are a lot of people calling for a mass mobilization being the only solution really to Russia's problems here, that they are losing too many troops. They are not recruiting at the numbers that they need and the numbers that they previously have done. They've probably largely exhausted their convict resources, so taking prisoners from jail and sending them to the front line. So it's going to be a case of trying to either have a mass mobilization, but if that's too unpopular, too controversial, then doing it by any other means, so some sort of forced conscription of certain demographics, so on and so forth. We'll have to wait and see, but they are no doubt in a bit of a bind, the Russians, as they double down. And it's a case of sunk cost fallacy, isn't it? They poured so much into the war, they can't pull out now. Ukrainian fiber optic FPV drones destroyed 59 Russian occupiers in the Liman direction of the front. Footage of combat work of the drone operators of the Signum Battalion. So you can spend 2 minutes watching a montage video of drone after drone after drone hitting, indeed, 59 Russian occupiers. Just incredible numbers of Russians that are lost to these drones on a daily basis. That's just one unit there. And then we have news that there are a group of Russian soldiers that went to shoot a fake video about the occupation of Kivsharivka. Soldiers of the 43rd Assault Brigade captured 6 of these flag bearers from the 153rd Tank Regiment of the Russian Federation. So going to record a video, hang a flag up somewhere, and the Ukrainians caught them. So that kind of PR exercise rather went the wrong way. But good to see that Ukrainians are still capturing Russian soldiers. This is a video that came out yesterday that I think is quite revealing. Interesting to see tanks still being used effectively at certain times in certain places. This is a Ukrainian tank firing direct rounds on concrete fortifications held by Russian assault near the strong point at a strong point near Helipole. And here they are, the Ukrainian tank right at the beginning, having a pop at. Why does it always do that? Plays music in my ears. Hits this strong point, then drives up closer, hits the second one, and then smacks another shell into that third one. And these concrete bunkers are just absolutely taken out. Then another shell there for good measure. In fact, a number of shells in that third one. You can see there's quite some network of trenches here. Fairly difficult, I'm sure, to take an area like that, but the Ukrainians are throwing in a tank to help out. Now, it's not just, oh, wow, that's cool, that's a tank doing that, but actually, what does that tell us? George Barros from the Institute for the Study of War says the apparent lack of Russian FPV drone defenses indicates Ukrainians are finding ways to achieve tactical drone dominance to enable getting heavy equipment back into the fight. 9 months ago, bringing equipment like this near to or into the kill zone was near impossible. So what's happened there? How have the Ukrainians been able to get a tank there without having that tank getting taken out by drone after drone after drone? If the Russians were doing a similar sort of move here, the Ukrainian drones would be all over that equipment for sure. Now, it seems the Russians are not particularly happy. The Russian mill bloggers, people in the information space, is not particularly happy with how things are playing out at the moment for them. The Spravdi, the Stratcom Center here, says Russia's biggest military bloggers are now confirming, quote, what we initially feared has happened. citing that Ukrainian forces' years-long campaign to destroy air defense networks in Crimea has finally left Russians defenseless on the peninsula. I've been talking a lot about how there's been this degradation of Russian air defense and radars right across Crimea. And not just that, they've been taking out all sorts of equipment there. People like the units like the Primari unit using these near-ear drones, and then you've had FP2 drones doing a heck of a lot of damage there. Different units active, taking out awesome amounts of equipment on Crimea. And the question is, to what end? Where's that going? What do they want to be able to do to Crimea or near Crimea or around Crimea? I interviewed Daniela, or I had a chat with Daniela from Touchny the other day, and we were talking about this subject as well, and they really have done a good job, the Ukrainians there. Well, this Russian mill blogger says the destruction of launchers and TZMs from the 300mm multiple launch rocket system Tornado S in Crimea by Ukrainian-controlled kamikaze drones. So showing the video that I showed yesterday of 3 Tornado S's, which are the equivalents of HIMARS. Haven't seen many of these used, first of all, and lost. So they're rarely used and rarely lost. To lose 3 in one strike, where they all seem to be parked up near to each other, is a really significant loss for the Russians. But this mill blogger says it can be concluded that what we initially feared has happened. The peninsula's air defense system suffered heavy damage from systematic Starlink drone strikes, after which Ukrainian drones began to knock out other targets, such as a Bastion missile system. So that fires those Onyx anti-ship missiles and long-range multiple launch rocket systems. That's coming from the military informant. So, not happy with how it's going. And here's an example of exactly what we've just been talking about. So the announcement from the Ukrainian General Staff is, I think I've got actually Max 25 has a slightly better version of this, which I will find because it gives us just slightly more detail. Give me 2 ticks. So here it is. It just elicits slightly more clearly. Alchevsk Metallurgical Plant, we're going to look at that in the distance strike section. Military echelon and an S-400 surface-to-air missile launching facility have been hit, according to the General Staff. So in Hardiska in Crimea, destruction of an S-400 Triumph system was confirmed. That high value, really good strike. That another S-400 in Crimea getting taken out. Alchevsk Metallurgical Plant involved in the production of large caliber ammunition that was hit. Among other things, yesterday in the area of Novoselivka in the Luhansk region, there were recorded strikes on military echelon of the invaders. In the area of Halai Zaporizhia, a drone command post was hit. Tavozhanka, the area of concentration of enemies' manpower was hit. I presume that's Tavozhanka up near Kupiansk, right in the north. And several concentrations of enemy personnel were hit in the areas of the settlements of Berezheva, which is an area that they've just sort of retaken, the Ukrainians, Bazivka in Sumy, and the Halai in Zaporizhia. So a number of different targets hit there, but the significant one for the point of this part of the video is the S-400 hit in Crimea. Really good to hear. Now, Ukrainian Special Forces strike again, says Dimko Zhuluktenko. Again, we have imagery coming from drones of ships being potentially struck here, but we don't have the video. So the other day I showed you a still from a drone video of a ship in Berdyansk looking like it was just about to be hit. Here we have possibly the same ship being hit just before it's hit and after it has been hit, but I'm not sure. And I have no idea where this is, what kind of ship it is. But there will be no place for Russian warships in the Ukrainian Black Sea, says Dimko. They will be bullied, chased, and humiliated. I wonder if we are still housewived, because Rheinmetall never produced anything that deleted the entire Russian Navy. Now, there is still a lot of harshness going towards Armin Papaga from Rheinmetall, who was very derogatory, I think, of the Ukrainians in their drone innovation and the drone industry. That has caused a heck of a lot of pushback from Ukrainians. It's still going on, and even Zelensky has just made a comment about it, which I think is actually unwise. I would just leave it. You make your point. You make your point on your back channels. You sort it out, and you move on. You do not want to upset a really strong supporter of Ukraine. I think it's counterproductive. So put away your pride type thing. Now, Atesh burned 3 electronic warfare towers near Novgorod, opening a path for drones to an aircraft repair plant. The towers were burned at 3 locations near Okhvat in Tver, Demyansk and Valdai in the Novgorod region. So 3 electronic warfare towers getting taken out by Atesh. That is useful. And then we hear, I have no idea whether this is a strike. It could be a strike. But in Stolitomak in Bashkiria, in Russia, something is burning at the chemical plant of the Bashkir Soda Company. And you can see that in the distance there. Smoke from even further away. BSK is one of the key producers of soda and chemical products in the Russian Federation. The plant's products are mass chemical reagents, which are used, among other things, in the defense industries. So it looks like this could well be some kind of strike or sabotage, but I've just put it here because I don't know yet. There have been quite a number of strikes on chemical plants over the last month or so, obviously throughout the last couple of years, really, off and on. But recently, I think Ukraine has been really ramping up strikes on chemical factories in order to hinder the production of munitions, as they will invariably be involved in making explosives. Right, moving on to distance strikes. Sursky, we are increasing the number of interceptor drone crews, strengthening the training of military personnel. Since the beginning of the spring, our drone interceptors have already destroyed more than 2,300 enemy air targets. In March, helicopters have destroyed 379 enemy strike drones. So helicopters playing a really important part. And drones, I was talking, was it yesterday, day before, a lot about how the Ukrainians have really ramped up drone production and are getting a lot of drones produced in Europe. Europe's producing either under license a lot of drones, sort of Ukrainian drones, but also there are a lot of European drones being sent to Ukraine. And they all need manning, right? And a lot of them are going to be reconnaissance drones. It's very difficult to blow all this stuff up without having reconnaissance. A lot of them are going to be interceptor drones to take out Shahed drones and similar. And then others will be sort of Mavics and other quadcopters and vampire drones and so on and so forth. Point being is that you need to match all of these things up. So, being able to acquire batteries and munitions, make these drones, but also to train and have enough drone pilots and drone teams and radar operators and all sorts in order to make these drones or allow these drones that they're manufacturing at scale to be used. So according to Zelensky, PAC-3, which are designed to shoot down ballistic missiles, continue to be in short supply worldwide as their production does not exceed 60 units per month, 2 a day. Are they using it? Is the world using more than 2 PAC-3 missile interceptors a day at the moment? Most certainly, with what's going on in Iran, so on and so forth. They are currently being sent to the Middle East, he says. At the same time, Kyiv continues to work to ensure that Ukraine is provided with anti-ballistic capabilities and is negotiating with 2 countries on this issue. Ukraine is preparing new defense agreements with Middle Eastern countries and is ready to send its specialists there, he said. They've also got 5 PAC-2 interceptor missiles. It won't last long, right? That's a night's worth, 2 nights worth. But they're getting 5 PAC-2 interceptor missiles from Spain, so that's good news. Fedorov has said private air defense is already working. The first results of intercepting enemy targets. Both Russia and Ukraine are doing this, which is right. We'll try and provide as much assistance as a nation as we can, as a state as we can, and get as many drones and air defense weapons and trained up personnel in as many strategic locations as possible. But if you really, really want to protect your own industrial facility or whatever facility it is, and you are likely to be targeted, then you, by all means, create your own private air defense companies. And one of the companies participating in the project has already prepared its own air defense group. Several enemy air drones have already been shot down in the Kharkiv region, in particular Shaheds and Zala drones. So that's fantastic. In parallel, the formation of new air defense groups is underway at 13 more enterprises that have received the status of an authorized business entity from the Ministry of Defense. So not everyone can do that. You have to be authorized in order to do that. But I don't see a problem. I think this is a great solution to a problem of not having enough state-controlled air defense capabilities, not enough capacity, and allowing the private sector to say, look, if you've got a license, if we checked out your kosher, if you've got a license, go ahead and do this to protect your own equipment if you want to do so, and that just will help out just in general. You're shooting down drones that are coming near you, might not be going for you, might be on the way to somewhere else, but that's going to help out if you guys can help out. I think that's brilliant. So yeah, here we hear that Spain will donate 5 Patriot Pack 2 to Ukraine. Right. 165 drones sent into Ukrainian airspace last night. 150 of them intercepted. There was a ballistic missile as well, Iskander K ballistic missile. I presume that got through. 7 locations were targeted. Debris fell at another 2 sites. 90 of the 164 drones were Shahed type drones. Now, I'm still at a loss as to how they work the figures out with regard to not intercepted drones. So, of those that are not intercepted, say 14 drones last night, which is a pretty good interception rate, 14 drones getting through. Is it the case that some of those were not Shahed drones, or are all of the drones that get through, as the way they calculate them, just automatically Shahed drones? The ones that don't get through, that are not intercepted but are decoys, are they counted as? I don't know. I don't know how they exactly count these numbers. Anyway, something to think of. Now, I'm not aware of too much that has been hit overnight. Russia once again attacked Ukraine. There are killed and injured. Kharkiv region, 1 person was killed, 4 injured. Private houses damaged. Dnipropetrovsk, house, garage, car, and infrastructure were damaged. Air defense was at work in Dnipro. I believe Cherkasy was also targeted, and 1 other place, I think. So not a lot of information, but there was obviously activity, a number of drones getting through, but a pretty good interception rate again from the Ukrainians. Going on to what the Ukrainians have both achieved previously and have achieved last night, we'll start with where we're at with regard to Primorsk, Sluga, all this kind of carry on. Zelensky has said partners, I find this A, totally unsurprising, B, annoying still. And I was waiting to hear something like this. So Zelensky said partners have signaled to Ukraine to reduce strikes on Russia's energy sector after the global energy crisis has taken hold, adding Kyiv is ready to halt attacks if Moscow stops targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure. So as long as you guys keep targeting our energy infrastructure, we will keep blowing up your refineries. But it's clear that I assume the United States has put some serious pressure on Ukraine to stop striking at these refineries. And we're going to have a little look at why that is so important for the rest of the world, particularly, we can say, India. So OSINT analysts at Okogora say the Primorsk port attack destroyed 8 tanks and damaged 5, leaving 72% of storage offline. Primorsk handles about 30% of Russia's oil exports, they note. Really serious amount of damage done to Primorsk here. You see some of these kind of central ones not affected. But yeah, that is a huge, huge proportion of the tanks at Primorsk being affected there. And then we have obviously Ust-Luga to consider. Ukrainian drone attacks successfully hit Russia's port of Ust-Luga again last night, setting another part. And this is actually from last night. This is, he means from 2 nights ago now. It's setting another part of the massive oil export terminal ablaze. A new fire could be seen burning at the complex this afternoon, reportedly consuming a processing station for light fuels. So it's not just storage. There are other elements to this whole setup that have been damaged. I'm sure, like loading infrastructure for ships, I'm sure that would have been damaged as well. Now, like shooting fish in a barrel, for the 3rd time in a week, Ukraine successfully did strike at Russia's oil and gas terminal in Ust-Luga on the Baltic Sea. It's far from Ukraine. It's as far from Ukraine as Sweden is from Italy. Wow. Special thanks to the Indian sailor for the battle damage assessment. So you've had a number of sailors out there unable to dock at the port, taking imagery of the port burning in the distance. And I reported yesterday that all of these Ust-Luga workers were unable to go to the port due to it burning, right? And then other footage has come out. I found this one is probably the most I think staggering in terms of the scale of the explosion taking place there. just incredible destruction. Obviously, very sad environmentally. I mean, the amount of pollutants being thrown into the air as a result of these strikes is phenomenal. And I'm sure that's going to be keenly felt at the moment, as some of the stats coming out for things like global warming and whatnot at the moment is kind of taking a back seat, considering there are two wars going on at the moment, but things are not looking good, should we say. Yeah, nonetheless, from a Ukrainian point of view, a really successful set of strikes at Ust-Luga. Damage to Ust-Luga and Primorsk ports threaten to wipe out potential growth in Russian oil export revenues, says Bloomberg. And I've been complaining that mainstream media has not been reporting on this nearly enough. They're starting to pick it up, starting to talk about this, but not in a kind of front page news. Like those kind of explosions, the kind of imagery that we've seen, that I've shared with you on these videos day after day after day recently, I'm amazed haven't found their way to like the 9 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news. I'm just amazed that they'll report on these sort of explosions in Kuwait or Israel or Iran. And then when Ukraine have these successes striking back, it's just met with silence. And then Bloomberg will come out and Reuters will come out saying, yep, they've wiped out potential growth in the Russian oil export revenues, growth as a result of the lifting of sanctions on Russia. I mean, this is exactly what we want to hear, that Ukraine have been able to mitigate against Trump's sanctions relief. So before the recent Ukrainian attacks, Primorsk and Ust-Luga handled about 45% or 1.72 million barrels per day of Russia's seaborne crude oil exports. And now Ukraine has been able to put pay to that growth. Now, we have a little bit of analysis here from just someone on Twitter, but I thought this was an interesting an interesting summary. I have a friend who works in oil shipping logistics in the Baltic region, says this person. He told me yesterday, we've never seen anything like this. 3 strikes in the same terminal in 7 days. Buyers are panicking. Tankers are sitting empty. Nobody knows when loadings resume. End quote. That's when I knew the headlines weren't telling the full story. I mean, the headlines aren't telling the story at all. Here's what you need to understand. Ukraine hit Ust-Luga, Russia's second largest oil export terminal, for the 3rd time this week. 700,000 barrels per day offline. That's a capacity offline. Primorsk, Russia's largest terminal, also suspended loadings. Combined, 40% of Russia's total oil export capacity gone. Repair timeline, 18 to 24 months, not weeks, not months, really. It's years. That is 1.5 to 2 years. Russia was making $270 million per day from oil exports. That money funds every missile hitting Ukraine. India, and here's the important one for what I just want you to consider for a second. India gets 80% of its Russian crude from these 2 ports. Global ripple effect is already starting. 3 days ago, Russia dropped its budget cut plans because the money was pouring in. So because of the sanction relief and selling loads more oil and the price of oil going up as well, they were seeing themselves as making loads of money. And so they cut plans to cut the budget. Today, the ports that generate that money are on fire. 400 drones, that's all it took to cripple 40% of the superpowers' oil exports. Most people won't see this, though. And that's the thing. These images, where are these on the mainstream media? Now, I'm just going to go back to this idea that 80% of Indian crude that comes from Russia comes from these ports. And is it a surprise that suddenly you see an Indian influencer ending up at Ust-Luga? So here's India has sent an online influencer to Russia's burning Ust-Luga oil export facility to calm the Indian population and prevent stockpiling after news of 40% of Russia's exports are being offline. Quote, there's no need to worry and absolutely no need to stock up, says this influencer, standing in front of a burning port. Nothing to see here. Don't worry. It's all okay. Now, I can't confirm that this image comes from Ust-Luga from the last couple of days. But if it does, I mean, wow. Igor Sushko, Russians putting out the fire at the port of Usluga. That'll work. Just look at those clouds compared to that tiny helicopter dropping a bucket of water. Yeah, good luck with that, mate. Right. Anyway, on to what happened last night. So a large wave of drones was heard or seen, reported heading over the border. This is Tim White last night towards Taganrog. So that is down, if you follow the Sea of Azov, Berdyansk to Mariupol. Next along there's Taganrog and then Rostov-on-Don. So Taganrog was targeted last night. It's also frantic in Voronezh. But we don't have much information coming out from either. I mean, there is some videos coming out from Taganrog. This is one of them. Consequences of the work of electronic warfare in Taganrog. Huge explosion there. And in fact, I'm wondering whether that explosion looks quite similar to this one. I'm wondering whether that is an ammunition depot or something that was struck there. It does seem to have the telltale signs of those kind of sparking elements of ammunition, but I don't know. So Taganrog was in the crosshairs as well. Alchevsk, and I think several places may have been targeted in Alchevsk, a substation. But yeah, multiple locations have been struck. Resources report no air defense activity. So Ukrainian drones are attacking occupied Alchevsk. We know that the metallurgical plant there was struck as well. Alchevsk, moment of the strikes, fairly significant strikes there. That's at quite a distance. The Alchevsk Metallurgical Plant in Luhansk region is on fire. So this is temporarily occupied territory in Ukraine. And then a substation was also hit. That might have something to do with railway logistics as well. So a lot of substations are being taken out, will be also or maybe exclusively feeding the railway network. At night, Ukrainian drones hit the substation in Alchevsk. Here you can see it, occupied Donetsk region. The attacks caused blackouts in the region, so obviously connected there to the general population as well, or maybe instead. Togliatti in Samara Oblast. This is the Kubiashev Azot, a major Russian chemical industry enterprise that was attacked. I think that's been attacked on successive nights now, and not just then. I think it's maybe the fourth time this has been targeted, certainly the third time. Certainly, Togliatti, I've reported three times at least. So a lot of activity in a number of places, Alchevsk, Togliatti, Taganrog. But I'm sure it'll be a case of more information emerging as the day goes on. I don't know that we've got anything else out at the moment. No. So we'll move on to other bits and pieces. And my goodness, so a bit of geopolitics here pertinent to the Russian economy, but it just seems more and more apparent with each passing week and month that allies of Ukraine are fighting the United States as well as Russia. So the US has allowed a Russian oil tanker to reach Cuba amid ongoing blockade and energy crisis. So they have blockaded Cuba, saying Cuba's next, we're going to screw Cuba over. Cuba like desperate for oil. So not only are they letting Cuba off, but they're letting Cuba off to the gain of Russia. Why would you do that? So if you were as hell-bent on screwing over Cuba, which apparently the Trump administration appears to be, well, it's just clear there's only one thing that's more important than not screwing over Cuba, which is allowing Russia to be appeased to get a benefit. Russia benefiting appears to be at the top of the agenda for the Trump administration. The US is allowing a Russian tanker carrying crude oil to reach Cuba. New York Times reported on March the 29th amid a de facto oil blockade imposed by Washington. Absolutely amazing. Then Trump has come out and said, so the reporter says to him, there's a report that the US is going to let a Russian oil tanker go to Cuba. Trump then says, if a country wants to send some oil into Cuba, I have no problem with that. The reporter says, do you worry that it helps Putin? Putin said, it doesn't help him. He loses one boatload of oil. That's all it is. It doesn't bother me. Nothing seems to bother you if it helps Russia. So 2 months after signing an executive order threatening tariffs on any country that sends oil to Cuba, So it's not just like anyone can send oil, because they can't send oil because you signed an executive order. Like, what is going on here? Trump now says he has no problem with countries doing that if they begin with R and end in Russian Federation. Just incredible. And it gets worse. Last week, says Trump, my envoy to Belarus, John Cole, after negotiating with highly respected President Alexander Lukashenko, he's a dictator in the continent of Europe. Negotiating with highly respected President Alexander Lukashenko got 250 more political prisoners freed. This brings the total prisoners gracefully released by President Lukashenko. So Lukashenko doesn't just release them, he gracefully releases them. Oh, but at what cost? Oh, you've lifted sanctions on Belarusian agriculture, Belarusian banking, Belarusian this, Belarusian that. That's not what you're saying in this message. I would like to give my warmest thank you, all caps, to the president for doing this. And I look forward to being with him at the next Board of Peace meeting. Christopher Miller from the Financial Times says, highly respected President Alexander Lukashenko, quote. That's how Trump just described the Belarusian authoritarian ruler, often referred to as Europe's last dictator, who rigged his 2020 election, brutally crushed the uprising that followed, has been implicated in kidnappings and killings of opposition figures, and aids Russia in the largest and deadliest war in Europe since 1945. I look forward to being with him at the next Board of Peace meeting. If you're an American, who voted for that man, you should be feeling sick right now. Now, I think this is ill-advised of Zelensky. If every housewife in Ukraine can produce drones, then every housewife can be the CEO of Rheinmetall. Now, I understand why he's saying this. There's a lot of hurt feelings from Ukrainians over this, and I did a whole video on this yesterday. Go and check that out if you don't know the controversy of what the CEO of Rheinmetall said. But the CEO of Rheinmetall is one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine. So don't get into a spat with someone that's providing an awful lot of kit for the benefit of Ukraine. President responded in the statement of the statement of the company's director about housewives with 3D printers. Zelensky stressed that the Ukraine demonstrates the effectiveness of its technologies every day on the front, in the sky, and at sea. According to him, we need to compete not with statements, but with results. And the Ukrainian defense industrial complex is already taking its place in the world. Now, what I would have said is I would have sung the praises of the Ukrainian drone sector without mentioning Rheinmetall, without mentioning the CEO. You can join the dots here yourself, but don't go and mention housewives, 3D printers, CEO of Rheinmetall, anything like that. Just say how wonderfully innovative the drone sector is and keep it at that. So I think that's a bit of naivety. But he has been very successful in the Middle East, Zelensky. During the meetings of the Middle East, the supply of PAC-3 interceptor missiles to Ukraine was discussed. Ukraine is negotiating with two countries on this issue, as I mentioned earlier. Zelensky, on the results of his visit to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, a document was signed between the Ministries of Defense, a path of contracts, technological cooperation, investments, and exchange of experience in protection against ballistics and drones. UAE, agreements on cooperation in the field of security and defense. Qatar, defense partnership for at least 10 years, joint products, co-production, and technologies. Jordan, interaction in the field of security was discussed. So I think that's good news for Ukraine. And they've secured an agreement with Gulf states to supply naval drones, these USVs that they have been manufacturing, but not using as much recently. So I wonder whether actually Russia have been able to repel these drones more easily than the Ukrainians would like. And then just to finish off with a real positive here, not Ukraine has logged 217,000 war crimes since February 2022. Verdicts that have been handed down, 245. One European court has 10 judges, should have 28. A 20,000 case annual docket, and one war crimes conviction so far. The deputy chief judge, little, certainly little. There's no time. So they probably haven't really achieved enough, not nearly enough. I know this is time-consuming stuff, and you need to be gathering all sorts of evidence, and there's a war going on, but still, there's a lot of desire for some of these cases to be concluded. Okay, One more thing. Here's a video that's just come out of Ukrainian forces hitting a moving Tor air defense system in Luhansk region, damaging the launcher during a coordinated operation with the deep strike units. I would be interested to know what drone hit that. The launcher looks like that'll be in a spot of bother going forward. And just to let you know that we have now completed our, I think, what's the amount of money that we have managed to get is over, it's something like 12,600 euros. We had a 12,000 euro goal for the frontline kit fundraiser that we've been doing. We have reached that, but any more money that goes into that will just go towards extra drones. So that is absolutely fabulous. Richard Woodruff is wonderful. He's doing such a good job out there. Go and follow him on Twitter. He sent me a load of videos. So I'm going to share those videos with you, do a video today probably with those videos of just spliced together lots of bits and pieces of what he's sort of sent and showing us. And then I think we'll be doing another Car for Ukraine fundraiser as well, as, you know, they are really awesome too. Really, everyone's really transparent that we work with, and you can get yourselves a Doris patch as well through Car for Ukraine. So I'll sort that out. I think they've got a landing page sorted for us, but in the meantime, you can finish off helping Frontline Kit if that is something you can do. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.